The sun was shining on the quiet town. The lake sparkled in the morning light, calm and peaceful. Ravi loved the lake more than anything. His small house stood near the water, and part of the lake belonged to his land. Whenever life felt heavy, Ravi went swimming. The water gave him peace, and the sound of waves reminded him of freedom. One summer morning, Ravi walked down to the shore, left his shoes on the grass, and dived into the cool water. The air was warm, and the gentle ripples danced around him. He swam slowly, enjoying the silence, thinking about nothing but the blue sky above him. But peace never lasted long in his neighborhood. A woman named Mira had made sure of that. Mira was the head of the homeowners association. People called her Karen behind her back because she always acted strict and controlling. She loved rules more than kindness, and she treated the lake as if it belonged to her alone. When Ravi finished swimming and walked back to his house, he noticed something strange on his front door. A white envelope was taped to it. He opened it and found a letter inside. His heart sank as he read the words. The letter said he had broken the whole rules by swimming in the lake. The fine was $1,000. Ravi read it again, shocked. He laughed bitterly because the lake was part of his own property. How could anyone fine him for swimming in his own water? It made no sense. Still, the letter was stamped with the HOA seal and signed by Mira herself. Later that afternoon, Ravi went to the HOA office, which was a small building near the park. Mira sat behind a desk, neatly dressed, with piles of papers stacked around her. She smiled in a way that was not friendly but proud, as if she had already won an argument before it began. "You received the notice," Mira said, not even waiting for him to speak. "Yes, I did," Ravi answered calmly. "But the lake is part of my land. You cannot fine me for swimming in my own lake." Mira leaned back in her chair, her smile wider now. "The HOA rules are clear. No resident is allowed to swim without permission. Rules keep order, and order keeps our community safe. You broke the rule, so you must pay." Ravi clenched his jaw but did not raise his voice. "The rule cannot apply to my own land. You cannot control what I do on my property. The rules apply to everyone," Mira said firmly, "even to you. You have 10 days to pay the fine. If you refuse, more penalties will follow." Ravi walked out without another word. The sun was setting over the trees, but his heart felt heavy. He knew Mira was not only wrong but unfair. Still, she believed she had power. For years, neighbors had suffered under her strict rules, but many stayed silent. She fined people for painting their houses the wrong color, for leaving small garden tools outside, even for parking in the wrong spot. Now it was Ravi's turn. That night, Ravi sat by his window, looking out at the lake. The moonlight touched the surface, and the water glowed faintly in the dark. He thought about the fine and about Mira's smile. Anger rose in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He was not a man who fought with loud words. He believed in patience, in watching carefully, and in striking when the right moment came. The $1,000 fine was not the real problem. The problem was power. Mira enjoyed controlling people, and as long as no one stood up to her, she would keep growing stronger. Ravi made a promise to himself. He would not pay the fine. He would not bow to her rules. Instead, he would find another way, a smarter way, to turn the tables. For now, he remained quiet. He paid attention to the details of the letter again, noticing the strange way it was worded, as if Mira herself had written it without legal support. Perhaps there were cracks in her system. Perhaps there were secrets in the HOA that nobody had seen before. Ravi's eyes hardened as he looked once more at the calm lake. He whispered softly, "This is my land, my lake, and I will not let her take it away." The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying his words into the night. The next morning, Ravi woke with a clear mind. The letter from Mira still lay on his table. The bold words demanding $1,000. He touched the paper once, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. If Mira thought he would pay so easily, she was mistaken. Instead of preparing money, Ravi prepared a plan. He believed every rule had a weakness and every system had cracks. Mira ruled the HOA with confidence, but confidence often hid mistakes. Ravi decided to search for those mistakes. He walked to the town office, a quiet building with rows of old files and records. The clerk behind the counter greeted him politely. Ravi asked for property maps, ownership documents, and whole registration papers. The clerk, though surprised, handed him thick folders. Ravi sat at a wooden table and began reading. Dusty papers told the story of how the community had been built decades ago. The land around the lake was divided into plots, families bought houses, and an HOA was formed to manage shared spaces. But as Ravi read deeper, he noticed strange gaps. Some documents were signed, others were missing signatures. Some maps showed the lake fully within private property, while others marked it as shared. The rules were unclear, and yet Mira used them as weapons. After hours of reading, Ravi leaned back in his chair. His eyes were tired, but his mind was awake. He realized something important. The HOA was never as strong as Mira claimed. Many of their rules had no legal ground. She had simply enforced them by fear and silence. But that was not all. In the financial reports, Ravi saw even more strange details every year. Homeowners paid fees for maintenance, lake care, and community work. But the spending did not match. Large sums of money were listed for projects that were never done. A playground that was never built. A path around the lake that never appeared. Where had the money gone? Ravi wrote notes carefully, page after page. By the time he left the office, he carried copies of important records with him. His heart was beating fast. Not from fear, but from hope. He felt like a fisherman who had just seen ripples in the water. Proof that a big catch was waiting below the surface. That evening, Ravi invited his neighbor Aaron for tea. Aaron was an old friend, quiet but wise. He had lived in the neighborhood for many years and knew Mira's ways well. Ravi spread the papers on the table. "Look at this," he said. "Here are the fees we all paid. And here are the projects that never happened." Aaron adjusted his glasses and read slowly. His eyes grew wide. "This is theft," he whispered. "She has been using our money for herself." Ravi nodded. "And here," he pointed to another page, "the whole rules are incomplete. Many are not official. She built her power on paper walls." Aaron leaned back, shocked but also relieved. "All these years, people thought she was untouchable. But you are showing me she is not." Ravi's face stayed calm, but there was determination in his eyes. "She fined me for swimming in my own lake. I will not only fight the fine, I will show everyone the truth." Aaron looked at him with respect. "Be careful, Ravi. She will not sit quietly when she feels her power is slipping." "I know," Ravi replied. "That is why I must move wisely." The next day, Ravi spoke to two more neighbors, Lada and Imran. Both had their own stories of unfair fines. Lada was fined for planting flowers of the wrong color. Imran was fined for leaving a bicycle outside his house. They listened closely. As Ravi showed them the records, their anger grew, but so did their hope. For the first time, people saw that Mira's rules could be challenged. That night, Ravi stood once more by the lake. The water reflected the stars above, calm and endless. He thought about Mira, sitting proudly in her office, believing she controlled everything. She had power only because no one questioned her. Now, that silence was breaking. Ravi's plan was not to shout or fight. His plan was to gather proof, gather people, and strike with truth. He imagined the day when Mira would face her own rules turned against her. He whispered to himself, "Steady and sure, she thinks she holds the lake. But soon, she will see she holds nothing." The night air was cool, carrying the promise of change. The morning air was fresh, but Ravi's mind was already racing. He had spent the last 2 days collecting records, speaking with neighbors, and studying every page of the HOA documents. The more he discovered, the clearer it became that Mira's power was built on shaky ground. Still, it was not enough to know the truth. He had to act. Ravi decided the first step was to test Mira's strength. He wrote a formal appeal against the fine, attaching copies of land maps and ownership documents that proved the lake belonged to his property. His words were simple and firm. He explained that the HOA had no right to control his private land and demanded that the fine be canceled. He sent the letter to the HOA office and waited. Days passed before he received an answer. Another white envelope appeared on his door. This time, the letter was shorter but sharper. It read, "Your appeal has been reviewed and rejected. The fine stands. Failure to pay will result in additional penalties." Ravi was not surprised. Mira would never accept defeat so easily. She believed her word was final. But this rejection gave Ravi what he wanted. Now he had proof that Mira ignored legal records and acted out of arrogance. That evening, Ravi gathered with Aaron, Lada, and Imran in his living room. Papers covered the table. The neighbors looked at him with both worry and curiosity. "She rejected my appeal," Ravi told them calmly, "which means she is not only wrong but reckless. She thinks no one can stop her." Imran clenched his fists. "She fined me for a bicycle. I paid because I was afraid. But now I see fear was her weapon. Maybe it is time we stop being afraid." Lada nodded. For years, people whispered about her unfairness. No one dared to speak openly. But if we stand together, maybe others will join. Aaron, the eldest, raised his hand slowly. "If you want to fight her, you must be careful. She knows how to twist words. But truth is stronger when it is shared. You should call for a community meeting." Ravi thought for a moment, then agreed. "Yes, but not yet. First, I need more proof, something so clear that even her voice cannot cover it." The group left with quiet determination. A seed of resistance had been planted. Meanwhile, Mira sat comfortably in her office. To her, Ravi's challenge was nothing more than a small annoyance. She believed she had crushed his attempt by rejecting the appeal. She told herself that people feared her too much to support him. What she did not know was that whispers were already spreading through the neighborhood. The next morning, Ravi returned to the town office. This time, he asked for financial records that went back 20 years. The clerk hesitated, but since the documents were public, he handed them over. Ravi spent hours going through them. His eyes caught a strange entry, large payments listed. Under lake management for several years, yet, when he compared them with the actual work done at the lake, nothing matched. The lake was the same as it had been since his childhood. No cleaning projects, no new pathways, no safety work. Where had the money gone? Ravi's heart beat faster. He copied the records and added them to his growing folder of evidence. That evening, he returned home and placed the papers on the table. As he looked at them, he felt a fire in his chest. This was more than about his fine. It was about justice for the whole community. Mira had taken money that belonged to everyone and used it as if it were her own. Later, he walked down to the lake. The setting sun painted the water orange and gold. Children played on the grass nearby, while their parents watched with quiet eyes. Ravi saw in those eyes the weight of years of unfair rules. He realized they were waiting, hoping someone would finally stand up. He stood tall and made a silent promise. "I will not fight for myself alone. I will fight for all of us." The next day, Ravi prepared copies of the records and gave them to Aaron, Lada, and Imran. "Keep these safe," he told them. "If anything happens, these papers will speak." Aaron looked at him seriously. "You are preparing for a storm, Ravi. Are you ready?" "Yes," Ravi answered. "And this time, she will not face only me. She will face all of us." The first counterattack had begun, not with shouting or anger, but with unity and proof. Mira had rejected his appeal, but in doing so, she had awakened a force stronger than her rules. The voice of her own community. As Ravi looked out at the lake that evening, the water was calm, but he knew change was moving beneath the surface. The fight was only beginning. The days passed quietly on the surface, but beneath that quiet, Ravi's plans grew stronger. He spent every evening studying the records he had collected. The stack of papers on his desk had grown tall, filled with proof of Mira's unfair actions. Still, Ravi felt there was something more, something hidden deeper. One afternoon, Ravi returned again to the town office. The clerk greeted him with a smile. Already used to his visits, Ravi asked for older maps of the land, especially the areas around the lake. The clerk searched the shelves and handed him rolled documents covered in dust. Ravi unrolled them carefully on the table. The maps were detailed, showing property lines, roads, and natural resources. As Ravi traced the edges of the lake, he noticed something unusual. A note was written in small letters near the shoreline, "Mineral rights reserved." His eyes narrowed. He looked through more maps and found the same note repeated in different years. Ravi's mind began to race. Mineral rights meant that the land under the lake had value beyond water and soil. He searched through additional files and soon found confirmation. The land beneath the lake held deposits of stone and sand that were once used for construction. Long ago, agreements were made that the HOA had to pay fees to the town for using that land. But when Ravi checked the recent records, he found no payments at all for years. The HOA had ignored its duty. That meant two things. The HOA had broken the law, and Mira had kept it hidden. Ravi leaned back in his chair, stunned by the discovery. This was more than simple mismanagement. This was a serious failure that could bring heavy fines on the HOA. And since Mira was the leader, the blame would fall directly on her. That evening, Ravi invited Aaron once more. He spread the maps and papers across the table. Aaron adjusted his glasses and studied them carefully. His face grew serious. "This is big," Aaron said quietly. The HOA was supposed to pay the town every year, but there are no records of any payments. "Do you know what this means?" Ravi nodded slowly. "It means Mira has been hiding this from everyone. If we show this to the town council, the HOA will face a massive penalty. Mira cannot escape it." Aaron looked at him with a mixture of worry and respect. "You are walking a dangerous path, Ravi. Once she learns you have this, she will fight harder than ever. Are you ready for that?" Ravi's eyes were steady. "I did not look for this. It came to me while I searched for truth. Now that I know, I cannot stay silent. This is bigger than my fine. This is about justice for everyone here." Word of Ravi's findings slowly spread among the neighbors. Lada and Imran listened with growing excitement when he explained it to them. They had lived under Mira's rules for years, paying fees without question. Now they learned that Mira herself had broken the greatest rule of all. "This will destroy her," Imran said firmly. Lada added, "She has built fear in everyone's hearts. But this truth will take that fear away." Meanwhile, Mira noticed the change in the air. For years, people lowered their eyes when she passed by, but now she saw whispers between neighbors. People avoided her gaze not from fear, but from quiet defiance. She felt it, though she did not yet know the reason. One evening, Mira marched to Ravi's house. She knocked sharply on the door. When Ravi opened, she gave him a smile that carried no warmth. "You are wasting your time," she said. "You think you can fight me, but you are only one man. The rules are mine. The power is mine. Pay your fine and accept your mistake." Ravi looked at her calmly. "Power is never owned. It is given by people, and people can take it back." Mira's eyes narrowed. She turned sharply and walked away, her steps heavy with anger. Ravi watched her go, knowing the battle was moving toward open conflict. But inside, he felt no fear. The discovery of the mineral rights had given him the key he needed. Mira had trapped others for years with small fines and harsh rules. But now she would be trapped by her own hidden crime. That night, Ravi stood by the lake again. The moon shone bright on the surface, and the water rippled gently in the breeze. To him, the lake was no longer just water. It was the heart of truth, holding secrets that Mira had tried to bury. Now those secrets had risen to the surface, and soon the whole community would see them. Ravi whispered to the still water, "The time is coming." And with that, he turned back toward his home, ready for the storm ahead. The air in the neighborhood was changing. For years, Mira had spoken with the tone of authority, and people obeyed her without question. But now whispers filled the streets. Neighbors spoke in quiet voices about missing money, unfair rules, and secrets under the lake. The power that Mira once held like a chain was beginning to loosen. Ravi felt the moment had come to act. He gathered Aaron, Lada, Imran, and a few more neighbors in his home. The small living room was crowded, but every face carried determination. Papers were stacked on the table, maps, financial records, and notes. "We cannot wait any longer," Ravi said firmly. "She thinks she can silence us one by one, but if we speak together, she cannot stop us. I will call for a community meeting. Everyone will hear the truth." The neighbors nodded in agreement. Aaron added, "You must be ready. She will try to turn the crowd against you. Do not let her words shake your ground." 2 days later, the community meeting was announced. Mira believed it was her chance to strengthen control. She entered the hall wearing her usual proud smile, greeting people with confidence. She had no idea what Ravi was about to reveal. The hall filled quickly. Families sat on wooden benches, curious and restless, at the front. Mira stood tall and began speaking about new rules and the importance of discipline. She reminded them about fines and order, using the same voice she always had. Then Ravi rose from his seat. The room grew quiet. "I need to speak," he said calmly. Mira frowned. "You may speak, but keep it short. The community has no time for excuses." Ravi stepped forward, carrying a folder of papers. He placed them on the table where everyone could see. His voice was steady and clear. "For years, we have paid fees to this HOA. We were told the money was for lake care, paths, and projects. But look at these records." He lifted one page high. Thousands were collected, but no projects were completed. "Where did the money go?" Gasps filled the hall. People leaned forward, whispering to one another. Mira's smile faltered, but she quickly regained it. "Do not listen to him," she said sharply. "He is angry about his fine and is trying to confuse you." Ravi ignored her interruption and spread another paper across the table. "Here are the land maps, signed years ago. The HOA was required to pay fees to the town for mineral rights under the lake. But in the last 10 years, no payments were made. This failure is serious. It means the HOA is in violation of town law." The room erupted in voices. Some stood, pointing at Mira. Others demanded answers. For the first time, Mira looked uneasy. "These are lies," she shouted. "He forged these papers to make me look guilty." Aaron stood up from the crowd. "I have seen the documents with my own eyes at the town office. These are not lies. They are truth." More neighbors supported him. Lada spoke loudly. "You fine me for flowers. You fine Imran for a bicycle. But who fines you?" "Mira, for stealing from us all." The hall shook with voices rising together. Mira tried to shout over them, but her words were drowned. Ravi raised his hand, and slowly the room calmed. "We can settle this with fairness. Let us vote. Should the HOA remain under Mira's control? Or should we demand new leadership and send these records to the town council?" The answer came in a wave of raised hands. Almost every hand in the room lifted high. Mira's face turned pale as she realized she had lost the people's trust. Still, she refused to bow. "You cannot remove me so easily. I built this HOA. I made the rules. You are nothing without me." Ravi looked at her steadily. "Rules exist to serve the people, not to crush them. You forgot that truth. And now the people are taking back what was always theirs." The meeting ended with cheers and voices of relief. For the first time in many years, neighbors walked out smiling, not in fear but in hope. That night, Mira sat alone in her office. The pile of papers on her desk no longer looked like symbols of power. They looked like chains closing in. She realized the town council would soon see the records. She could not stop it. Meanwhile, Ravi stood by the lake, watching the moonlight touch the water. The air felt lighter, as if the community itself had taken a deep breath. He knew the battle was not over. Mira would fight back in desperation. But the tables had turned. The people were no longer silent. The truth had been spoken. And once spoken, it could not be silenced again. The neighborhood was no longer the same after the meeting, where fear once walked. Now courage moved. Neighbors spoke openly in the streets. Children played near the lake without glancing over their shoulders. The chains of silence that Mira had built for years were breaking apart. But Mira herself was restless. in her office. She paced back and forth, her face tense. She knew the people were turning against her, yet she refused to admit defeat. She believed there was still a way to keep her throne of power. Her plan came quickly. The next morning, every house received a new notice. The paper demanded an emergency fee of $200 per family to cover what she called unexpected costs. Mira thought fear would bring people back under her control. She thought they would pay to avoid trouble. But this time, the neighbors were not silent. They gathered in Ravi's yard with the notice in their hands, anger in their voices. "She thinks she can still order us," Imran said sharply. Lada shook her head. "We should not pay another coin. She has taken enough already." Ravi listened quietly, then raised his hand. "Do not pay. She has no power left. The town council has received the records. Soon they will speak, and her lies will collapse." His words spread through the crowd like fire. One by one, neighbors agreed. No one would pay. Mira's final attempt at control was falling apart. Days later, an official letter arrived from the town council. It was delivered not only to Mira, but also to every household in the neighborhood. The letter explained that the HOA had failed to pay mineral rights fees for many years. The penalty was heavy, nearly $50,000. The responsibility was placed on the HOA leadership. When neighbors read the letter, they cheered. Some laughed, others clapped their hands in relief. Mira, however, sat frozen in her office. $50,000 was more than she could ever pay. Her face grew pale as she realized the truth. That evening, another community meeting was held. The hall was filled again, but this time the air carried joy instead of fear. Ravi stood before the people, holding the letter from the council. "This is justice," he said firmly. "The town has spoken. The penalties will fall on Mira and the whole leadership. She cannot escape." The crowd applauded. Lada called out, "We are free from her rules." Imran added, "No more unfair fines, no more fear." All eyes turned to Mira, who sat in the corner, her once proud shoulders slumped for years. She had stood above everyone, speaking with authority. Now she looked smaller, weaker, as if the very weight of her own actions had crushed her. When the voices quieted, Ravi turned to her. "For years, you punished us for small things, a flower, a bicycle, a swim in the lake. You used fear to build your power, but you forgot that power belongs to the people, not to one person. Today, that truth has returned." Mira did not answer. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She lowered her eyes, unable to face the crowd. The community voted again, this time formally removing Mira from her position. A new group of neighbors was chosen to lead the HOA, with Ravi as their guide. Cheers filled the hall as people celebrated a fresh beginning. That night, the news spread quickly through every street. Lights glowed from houses as families shared the victory. Children laughed by the lake, and their parents watched with smiles of relief for the first time in many years. The neighborhood felt free. Meanwhile, Mira sat alone in her home. The proud leader who once demanded obedience was now a woman trapped by her own lies. The walls of her house, once symbols of her strength, now felt like a cage. She knew the council's penalties would not disappear. She would have to pay. The fall of Mira was complete. The same rules she had twisted for others had now twisted back upon her. At his own home, Ravi stood by the window, looking at the calm surface of the lake. His heart was steady. He had not fought with anger or violence. He had fought with patience, truth, and unity, and the truth had won. He turned to Aaron, who sat beside him. The old neighbor smiled softly. "You have done what many only dreamed of, Ravi. You broke her chains without lifting a sword." Ravi nodded. "It was not me alone. It was all of us together. That is the strength she never understood." Outside, the night air carried voices of laughter. The community had taken back its freedom, and Mira, the woman who once thought herself untouchable, had fallen from her throne. The sun rose gently over the neighborhood, casting golden light across the calm waters of the lake. For the first time in many years, the air felt free of tension. Families walked along the paths without fear of sudden fines. Children laughed. As they played, and neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. The shadow that Mira had cast over them was gone. Ravi stood on his porch, watching the scene. His heart felt light, but his mind stayed focused. Though Mira had been removed from power, the work of rebuilding the community had only just begun. He knew that without fairness and honesty, the HOA could fall into the same trap again. That evening, the first meeting of the new HOA council was held. Ravi sat at the head of the table, surrounded by Aaron, Lada, Imran, and two other trusted neighbors chosen by vote. The room, once filled with fear, now carried an air of hope. Ravi began. We are here not to rule over others, but to serve them. Rules must protect, not punish. Money collected must be used for the community, not for personal gain. Let this council be different from the one before. The others nodded in agreement. They discussed new plans for the neighborhood, repairing broken fences, planting more trees by the lake, and creating safe spaces for children to play. For the first time, the HOA sounded like what it was meant to be, a group working for the good of all. But one last matter remained. The penalty from the town council was heavy. Mira was held responsible. But as long as she remained in the neighborhood, she might try to stir trouble again. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived, this time addressed to Mira. It explained that she must personally cover $5,000 of the penalty as punishment for misuse of community funds. The rest of the fine would be managed through proper legal channels. But her personal fee could not be avoided. When the neighbors learned of this, they saw it as fitting justice. Mira had fined others for years over flowers, bicycles, and simple mistakes. Now she faced a fine of her own, one far heavier than any she had given. The day Mira received the letter, she walked quickly to Ravi's home. She no longer carried the proud look of a ruler. Her eyes were tired, her voice unsteady. You did this, she said bitterly. You turned them against me. Ravi stood calmly at his door. No, Mira, you did this to yourself. You thought fear was stronger than truth. But fear fades when people stand together. Truth does not fade. Mira lowered her eyes for a moment. It seemed she wanted to argue, but the strength was gone from her voice. Without another word, she turned and walked away. Within a month, Mira sold her house. No one stopped her, and no one tried to hold her back. The woman who once acted like a queen of the neighborhood left quietly, carrying the weight of her own mistakes. When news of her departure spread, the neighbors gathered by the lake. Some brought food, others music, and together they held a small celebration. Children splashed in the shallow water, families laughed, and the evening sky filled with joy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Aaron raised his voice. For years, we lived under rules that felt like chains, but now those chains are broken. Let us remember that this freedom came not from anger, but from unity. The crowd clapped and cheered. Ravi stood a little apart, watching the scene with a gentle smile. He remembered the first day he received that unfair fine, the anger in his heart, and the promise he made to himself. Now, standing by the lake, he saw that promise fulfilled. Later, as the stars appeared, Ravi walked alone to the water's edge. The lake reflected the night sky, calm and endless. He dipped his hand into the cool water and whispered softly, "This is ours, not mine alone, but all of ours together." Behind him, he heard laughter and music from the gathering. The neighborhood had changed forever, not because one man fought alone, but because one man lit a spark that others carried with him. Ravi rose and turned back toward the people. He knew the journey was not finished. There would always be challenges, always decisions to make, but as long as they stood together, no single person could ever control them again. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, no longer a place of fines and fear, but a symbol of freedom and unity. And with that, peace finally returned to the community.